morning, everybody. I'm very glad and very honored to be here with you to share with you this presentation, and I hope I will give the best value to the audience. So today I will give a presentation based on my PhD thesis entitled Islamic Venture Capital in French Law, a Legal Analysis. So the purpose of the presentation is to analyze the implementation of Islamic venture capital into the French legal framework, and also to see if this is an efficient model for Islamic investors. So I will start by introducing my agenda. So first I will define what is Islamic venture capital and explain the main characteristic of this operation. After, I will do comparison between the venture capital model and the conventional venture capital model and the Islamic venture capital model. Then I will analyze the French regulatory framework for venture capital, and I will explain which investment vehicle is the most suitable for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation in France. And finally, I will present a case study. So first, key characteristic of Islamic venture capital. So let's start first by a definition of what is Islamic venture capital. So as you know, the Sharia clearly defined activity in which Muslims are not to be involved, like entertainment or alcohol and so on. And consequently, Muslims cannot invest in assets of businesses earning primarily from such activities. So this is we can define Islamic venture capital as an operation which consists in taking equity participation in unlisted companies that are considered compliant with Islamic ethics to finance their creation and their startup. So it's, compared to the sukuk or the other operation of Islamic finance, the Islamic venture capital market is very new because it has been developed since the early 2000 years, so 2001, 2002, 3. So it's a very new market. So as I explained, the Sharia screening, actually, the fact that you can't, Muslim can't invest in all type of companies because there is some, restriction. It's called in Islamic finance the Sharia screening, and this is the core of the Islamic venture capital logic. And I will, as you can see in this diagram, I'm trying to explain what is the main process in the Sharia screening in order to invest in a company which is considered as Sharia compliant. So, as I say, the Sharia screening refers to the process of identifying Sharia compliant investments. So you have 3 steps into the Sharia screening. So the first one is the business activity screening, which I'm going to define. The second one is the financial screening, and the third one is the dividend screening. So the business activity screening. So as you can see in the diagram, this is the first part. It means that the activities of the venture companies, as I explained previously, must be Sharia compliant. So, which means actually that you can't invest in non-permitted Sharia activities, which include, for instance, as you know, financial services based on riba, gambling, manufacturing or sell non-halal products, entertainment activities, and so on, hotel, resort, and so on. So, for the second one, the financial screening, as you can see below, it means that Islamic investment principle does not allow investment in company deriving significant income from interest or company that have excessive leverage, like a debt ratio of 33%. The fund use a financial ratio has a total debt over total asset to screen for this company. And the third one, so the third step is the dividend screening. And you can see at the bottom of the diagram. So the sum of the non-Sharia compliant income are if the sum of the non-Sharia compliant income are superior to 5%, the company is not Sharia compliant, which means that the stock is deemed to be non-compliant and the equity position is not established. So on the other side of this restriction, you have the concept of purification. So, and the non-compliant income, if the non-compliant income is less to 5% of the total revenue, so the company is compliant. And as I explained previously, the Sharia screening is really the core of the Islamic venture capital logic. So now we're going to move to a comparison between the venture capital model and the Islamic venture capital model to see what are the main differences. So actually, the general principle of venture capital are not really alien to Islamic law and to Islamic finance, actually. And this is mainly why I chose this model for my PhD thesis, because they are really in relation. And as conventional venture capital, Islamic venture capital consists in acquiring equity interest in high potential, high risk growth startup company. And it also consists in financing the real economy, which is also the same logical of Islamic finance. Venture capital is also praised for its role in promoting, as I explained, growth while maintaining financial stability, which is also the main purpose of Islamic finance. So, as I said, that you can read on the PowerPoint, these two models fit with the natural Sharia principle. They are also sharing together profits and risk sharing, active participation in businesses, invest in bona fide businesses, and not purely highly structured financial instrument. And there is also in the two model low debt or gearing ratio. So this is the first starting to develop an analysis on how we can structuring an Islamic venture capital operation into a non-Muslim country. And the first step is to show that the two models are sharing the same principle and that have the same logical. So then just prepare the diagram to show that if we juxtaposing the two business models, they're actually quite the same. There are only few differences, and I have highlighted the few differences in red. So as we can notice, the overall business process of Islamic venture capital can be derived from the conventional model, provided that, as you can see in the diagram, that each phase of the process complies with Sharia principle. So it practiced in mean that the funding, investment, and the contract must be Sharia compliant. The main difference, actually, and that I explained previously, is that the Islamic fund has to set up a business process like the Sharia screening in order to identify which company is Sharia compliant or not. So, as I said, it's practice. The company, the fund, could not invest in a company which are considered doing haram activities like trading pork, alcohol, and so on. And the fund is have another obligation to set up special rules on income distribution in order to purify the revenue and to respect the principle of zakat. So after presenting all this framework and that we have just realized that the two models are quite the same, they're sharing the same principle, and they're not so different from each other. Let's then move to the French regulatory framework for Islamic venture capital fund and to see if there is a French legal framework which could be suitable to this kind of operation. So actually, there is opportunity for Islamic venture capital fund in France, and notably to play a role in ensuring equity capital for French SMEs. In fact, due to the economical context and to the crisis since 2008, the French SMEs are suffering from a lack of financing or bad financing. They need liquidity to sustain their development. And the SMEs are the biggest private equity. SMEs are at the core of the economy of France, and France is also the biggest private equity market in Europe. So there is a real need to foster business growth and job creation into the country. So in order to ensure greater longevity for SMEs and to power up innovation, the French government since 2008 tries to promote the venture capital industry in the country through main reforms. And this is also the reason why since 2007, the French authority have taken several reforms to provide a legal framework for Islamic finance in order to attract investors from the Middle East and investor in Islamic investor who might be interested in investing in a French company, and especially in SMEs. Which is a little bit, I can understand, surprising that the French government took several reforms for attracting Islamic finance in France, because we, as you know, France is not the natural country for Islamic finance, but actually this is the truth. Since 2007, and especially Mrs. Christine Lagarde, who was the Minister of Economy, she set up a framework in order to attract Islamic investors in France. So, unlike as I explained previously, like the implementation of Islamic financing like Murabaha, Sukuk, or Ijara, French authority didn't adopt legislative and tax reform to introduce Islamic fund in the country, which means that they didn't even took some minor reform, change the framework, that there's no circular or decree related to Islamic finance for Islamic funds. So in order to attract the investor from the Middle East and Islamic investors, actually the French regulators have provided a receptive legal framework for Islamic funds. And in 2006, the French Financial Market Authority, which is called the IMF, has approved the first Islamic fund in the country, which is called EASY ETF DG Islamic Market Titans 100. This fund was a subsidiary of the BNP Paribas, which is one of the biggest banks in the country. And after you have just several other Islamic funds, French Islamic fund, and one in La Réunion, and another which is also still available, which is called Karama Etik in the country. And it's coming from the subsidiary of the Bread Bank, which is also a French bank. So, and in order to facilitate the creation of Islamic fund in the country, so as I said, the government didn't take minor reform, didn't implement decrees or circular related to this kind of operation, but the IMF only published a note, a simple note, entitled Extra Financial Criteria for Security Selection and Application of these criteria to fund declaring themselves compliant with Islamic law. So this note is dated from 2007, but this note was updated in 2013 and 2015. So it's still available, and it's still related to Islamic fund in the country. So according to this note, the French venture capital structure and the Islamic fund could extract financial criteria in the investment decision, which means that actually that they could proceed to the Sharia screening. The authority also admit that this structure into the note could set up special rules on income distribution. So, which means they could distribute impure revenue to charity and to proceed to the zakat with impure revenue. So, according to this note, you can notice that Islamic funds and Islamic venture capital fund and all the other funds which are related to venture capital are subjected to the same agreement procedure as conventional fund. So there is no difference. This is the same legal framework for a mutual fund and an Islamic mutual fund in the French legal framework. The only difference is this, that the Islamic mutual fund, according to the note, could proceed to a Sharia screening. No difference between the two. So, according to the note and to the legal framework, the Islamic fund that doesn't have a specific requirement from the IMF. There is no specific requirement for the management company to manage the Islamic fund. And as soon as the fund does not violate the public order, which means that there is no, for instance, discrimination that, for instance, that if the prospectus of the fund doesn't specify that they're going to choose their investor according to their religious faith, which is something forbidden in the French law because it's constrained the public order. this is okay. I mean, there is no difference between the two funds, and you can set up an Islamic mutual fund into the French legal framework. So, as I explained into the PowerPoint, so the Islamic mutual fund could invest in France, use the extra financial criteria, and set up the special room on income distribution. However, the note specifies few things. The first one is that the management company should remain independent from the Sharia board. And actually, the Sharia board is not specified as the Sharia board into the notes. It is specified as the third advisory board. They are not using the word Sharia board. And the IMF is not competent to control what the Sharia board is doing. But they are paying attention to the fact that the Sharia board should be independent to the management company and should not be involved into the control and to the work of the management company. It is just only an advisory board. According to this point, let's study now the French legal framework for venture capital, and to see what vehicle could be suitable for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation into the French legal framework. So regarding this diagram, we can see that the French legal framework, actually in the French legal framework, you have several structure for structuring in venture capital operation. You don't have only funds. You have several things. So you have funds of funds, private equity investment companies, local investment funds, and alternative investment funds, which are called FEA. So the investor actually has the choice. He could choose between these four structures. And all the structure means that you're going to invest in a different way from the other. But now we're trying to see what is the most suitable vehicle for structuring Islamic venture capital operation. And what is the structure which could permit to the investor to proceed to the Sharia screening and to purifying the income. So in France, as I explained, we have the FEA, which are coming from the directive of 2011, the IEFM directive, which is called actually the Alternative Investment Fund Management Directive. And this directive has changed the framework on funds in Europe. And according to this directive, you have now two types of UCITS. So you have the UCITS, the OPCVM, UCITS, and you have now the FEA. And the venture capital fund now are under the FEA. So they are now considering venture capital fund in Europe and in France, and now considering investment alternative funds. So just coming back to my diagram, and I'm just trying to show that even if we have several structures to set up a venture capital operation in the French legal framework, actually the most suitable vehicle for structuring this kind of operation into the French legal framework is the FEA. Why? I'm going to explain why in this point. So to my mind, the FEA is the most suitable investment vehicle for structuring a Islamic venture capital operation into the French legal framework for four main reasons. First, the FEA is open to all type of investors. So foreign investors, qualified investors, all type of investor, which is very comfortable for investor coming from abroad who want to set up different kind of operation, qualified investors, non-qualified investors, and this vehicle is adapted to all this type of operation. So I've highlighted in grid FCPR, but actually the FCPR is the private equity investment fund, but it's part of the FEA. So actually in the FEA you have several types of funds, and you have the private equity investment fund, which are called in the French legal framework FCPR, Fonds commun de placement à risque. But this is a FEA. Secondly, this vehicle, so the FCPR, is providing legal security to investors because they are controlled by the IMF, the Financial Market Authority. So they are controlled investment vehicles, so the investors is controlled, so he has a kind of security. So as I explained previously, according to the IMF note published in 2007, the FCPR permit to proceed to the Sharia screening and to select suitable companies for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation. And finally, it's also a good reason to choose this vehicle and not another. The FCPR entitled the subscriber to tax relief, to a form of tax relief. So actually, the French legal framework seems to be very flexible because we don't have to change the framework. We have already all the vehicle, the framework is flexible, and you use the structure that you have for the conventional venture capital operation to structuring an Islamic venture capital operation. So now let's move to a case study. So as I said, that there is few factors which difference Islamic venture capital funds from conventional funds, and you also have matter to consider when you want to establish an Islamic fund into the French legal framework. So even if you choose the FCPR structure, you have to take into account few things in order to be Sharia compliant and to structuring the operation in compliance with all the requirements of the Islamic law. So the fund structure first. So the Sharia compliant investment is required to be managed on a basis of either a mudaraba or wakala arrangement. So as I said, that we are not going to entitle the FCPR as a wakala or musharaka contract, but the management company is going to act like a mudaraba operation or wakala operation. So you have also to take into account that you have the Sharia board into the operation, which is highlighted in red, and as I explained according to the note of the IMF, the Sharia board is going to be involved into the reviewing of the fund structure, the investment, to issue a fatwa, but this fatwa is only going to be taken into account by the investors. I mean, the IMF is not going to take into account the fatwa, and this is an important point. You have to take into account this point in France. The IMF is not going to control the Sharia board. The fatwa is going to be issued. This is the responsibility of the management company and her responsibility towards the investors. The Sharia board is going to also review the document, the structure, as I explained, and also advise on the purification of the profits of the fund and advise to the payments. But apart this point, and you can notice that there is no real difference between the two models. I mean, in the FCPR structure of the Islamic Sharia compliant FCPR structure, you have the investment manager, the administrator, the custodian, the registrar, the distributor. The management company is also registered with the IMF. The process of the investment into a startup is quite the same. Apart the fact that the fund company, the management company is going to proceed to the Sharia screening. I mean, the main difference is the existence of the Sharia bond. So now we have seen that and as I explained, the French law offers suitable vehicle to Islamic venture capitalists in France, but we also have to regarding other sort of requirements in terms of shareholders. So, and also to look what the shareholders could do or could not do regarding the Islamic law and the Islamic finance requirements. So let's look at the governance and the management of the fund, and to examine what is Islamic and conventional, if Islamic fund and conventional fund are similar or not, and what are the main difference. So as you can notice in this diagram, I have highlighted the main difference in red. And as you can see, there is only one difference, which is a minor difference. According to the table, most of the clauses and the covenant of the conventional venture capital do not contradict the Sharia model. The main difference is, as you can see, that in the Islamic model, you can't use preferred stock or preferred shares, but I mean not all type of preferred shares, only one type of preferred shares, is the preferred shares related to the right to dividend and income and capital return, which means that you can't, in an Islamic venture capital operation or an Islamic fund, give to the investor financial preferred shares related to financial rights. You have to treat them equally regarding this point. But you can set up preferred shares for political rights, political voting rights. This is only related to the financial point and the income distribution. So as I said, that you have to set up the equality between all the investors, especially for this point. But you can give preferred stock or preferred shares for investors in Islamic fund related to the political right. This is agreed by Islamic finance. So as you can see, and as I explained previously into this figure, in this one, you don't have a lot of difference between the two models. They are quite the same, only few difference, but the legal framework is the same vehicle, the same logic. You have only the main difference in the Sharia screening. So, conclusion. So, as we can notice, and it's really different to my mind to the implementation of sukuk or murabaha or ijara in the French legal framework, when the government has to take circular or decrees to implement this structure. The French legal framework for venture capital is already flexible and is actually, we can see, maybe welcoming the Islamic venture capital operation. The French regulator have provided a receptive legal framework for Islamic venture capital fund or Islamic fund in France by only issuing the note of 2007, which has been updated in 2013 and 2015. The Islamic venture capital model may be structured under the existing legal and regulatory framework by choosing the FCPR, which is one type of FEA, Alternative Investment Fund. You don't have no need to implement legislative and tax reform to structuring this kind of operation. And as you can see, the venture capital is largely compliant with Sharia principle. Even in the business process, you have only few difference, which is mainly the Sharia screening. And we can think that Islamic venture capital could be the next window for SMEs financing. I mean, the purpose of this, the presentation is not to say that Islamic venture capital funds or Islamic venture capital is going to solve the SMEs financing problem in France. We are not presenting this as a magic solution, but you're just showing that this is possible under the existing legal regulatory framework in France, and it may attract investors from abroad, Islamic investors from the Middle East, would might be interested in investing in SMEs in France. And it's also an opportunity for some entrepreneurs in France who don't want to get into this market due to their religion's faith or some personal reason, that this is possible. Actually you can go on. You can structuring this kind of operation. You have already all the investment vehicle. The framework is ready. So don't be afraid and just try it. I mean, this is not. I mean, this is another, I think that is another opportunity for Islamic finance to be developed into the country. And we are not just with this kind of operation expecting something from the government. We don't need any reform. This is already implemented. That's all.
Thank you, Dorsaf. Gentlemen, where are we starting with? Questions here in Paris or in Jeddah or in Madrid?
Well, you are the director now for this seminar, so please go ahead and select.
Thank you. In fact, if you permit me, I have some questions. The first one will be a very little one, but it's connected with the news. You introduced the concept of preferred stocks, and I must confess, I'm a complete ignorant about Islamic regulations of stocks. And well, you introduced the concept of preferred stocks, preferred shares, and you said that some preferred shares are not allowed in Islamic funds. Did you mean the kind of preferred shares that do not carry voting rights, such as the shares which were issued by Snap?
No, this one are permitted by Islamic finance and Islamic law. This is the preferred shares which confers right to dividend, which are forbidden by Islamic law, because they are setting up inequality between the investors.
But the preferred shares by Snap, they don't carry a voting right, but they do carry a dividend.
So if they are carrying a dividend, yes, they are forbidden. But if they are giving voting rights, political rights,
without dividend, it's okay.
It's okay because it's a political right. But the thing is that the investor have to be treated equally, from a financial point of view.
Okay, but the point with shares that do carry only voting rights is that you don't get the dividend, hence you're not treated equally. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering whether the point was not about what we call dividend pushers, which are preferred stocks that give not exactly a dividend, but dividend on a pre-agreed schedule, which means that in fact you get the money even when the firm doesn't make any profits. So it's called dividend pushers because there is a dividend even when there's no profit, which is close to riba because it's
interest. Yes.
Yeah, it's closer to interest than to dividend. So well. I don't know what are the references here. Maybe I should go to the IOFE norms, but I'm not sure I will.
They're coming from the IOFE. That in my thesis, I tried to analyze all the different kind of clauses, covenants you have in venture capital, conventional venture capital operation, and to see in the shareholder agreement what you can do in Islamic venture capital operation in the French legal framework. And I have noticed regarding the IOFE requirement that you can't set up preferred shares, financial preferred shares for Islamic investors. They are forbidden. But this is the only point.
Okay.
That's why I have highlighted this into my table.
I guess our friends in Jeddah will answer to my question with very precise statements. Well, I do have two more questions which are linked together. The first one is about the characterization of a French legal framework. In fact, you explained clearly that the FIA, the alternative investment funds, are connected with the IAFM directive.
Yeah.
On the one hand, which is a European directive, and on the other hand, what we call OPCVM are connected with the UCITS directive.
Yeah.
So basically, the legal framework is European.
Yeah.
Which means that, in fact, when we talk about French legal framework, of course, you can invest in French venture capital in any European country through passporting.
Yeah, through passporting. But the thing is that don't forget there is the IMF note on Islamic funds, and this is a national note. I mean, the IMF is only regulating France, not regulating Luxembourg or Germany. So you have to take into account that we have to may wonder if you could use the extra financial criteria in Europe, in other European country. But of course, you can use the passport in and the passport out and invest with this fund into.
Because you are addressing the public.
Yeah.
Remember that you're addressing the public, and so countries have different protection mechanisms for the public.
Okay, but the passport in
of course,
available, which means you well, basically, when your product is authorized in France, it may be
of course,
the EU, but of course you must comply with
of course
consumer protection rules in the country where you try to sell your product.
The local ordre public.
Okay.
I got your point. It's true that because I just thought you were talking about the regulation authority, but it's true that as soon as you get the agreement from the IMF and you have structuring your funds and the mutual fund is agreed by the IMF, you have the right to ask for passport in or passport out and to trade this fund in the Europe. And so this is the same for an Islamic fund as soon as it has been agreed by the IMF.
But you have to go through procedure, right? If you are going to market the
actually,
in Germany, you have to go through the
No. You just have to ask to the IMF to provide you a passport in or passport out, and then you can market your fund in Germany, England, going to leave soon. But I mean, across Europe, it's a very simple procedure. It's not something very complicated, and it's true that.
But this is only the first part of the question, because the second part of the question was, you told us that in 2006 there was an exchange-traded fund which was marketed by BNP Paribas.
Yes.
And now we know that the big places in Europe for the mutual fund industry is Luxembourg and then maybe a bit Ireland.
Yeah.
And hence, my question is then, what about the real-world issue, which is basically, are they new Islamic venture capital funds in the European Union, especially in France? Or are we all buying Luxembourg funds?
As I've said, Luxembourg is still the main places for Islamic fund in Europe. It's true. But as I explained in my presentation, that there is still an Islamic fund in France. They don't communicate a lot on it, but I don't know why. But it's still existing, and actually I put it into my book. This is this fund called Karama Ethique. And I have put the prospectus into my book. And this fund is coming from a subsidiary of the management company of the Bread Bank, which is a big French bank. And this Islamic fund is an Islamic fund. It is written into the prospectus that there is a Sharia screening. It's still available. And it's still open to investors. But it's true that the main market in Europe for Islamic funds is Luxembourg. And why? Why? I guess that because the government is pushing up for Islamic funds in Luxembourg, and there is no political willingness in France to communicate on this type of market and to pushing up Islamic funds. This is the reality, but...
The Luxembourg fund, do they have what you are talking about, the passport to
Of course.
in France?
Of course. The passport in and the passport out is available for all the European countries. I mean, as Pierre Charles explained, the legal framework for funds in France is a European legal framework. It's coming from the Alternative Investment Fund Manager Directive. And this fund, this directive is for all the European Union. So I mean, you can set up a FEA in Belgium, in Germany, everywhere, and all this kind of structure. They have the right to the passport in, to the passport out, and they're all submitted to the same requirements. There are only a few differences, as I explained with the notes, but they are all submitted the same requirements, European requirements.
Sorry.
Well, it's okay. So my only last question is that I wanted to be sure that at the moment there is still only one fund, actually French.
I can't confirm that there is only one. I guess there are more than one, but the most famous, I mean, it's Karama Ethique.
Okay.
In France. But Karama Ethique is well known, and I mean, it's not a new fund. I mean, it's maybe 5 or few years.
2009, I guess.
2009. So it's and it's still available. So
Thank you, Dorsaf. So I'm sorry for monopolizing the floor. Maybe you get other questions from Paris.
It's possible to explain the concept of purification?
So the purification is maybe I can.
On the slide.
Sixth slide. This one?
No, I think just about 5%. You have explained the concept of distillation at several times.
5%.
Yeah, the fact that purification is something simple is that when you have revenue that are coming from riba or for forbidden activity, and it's not it's below of 5% of the income of the company, you have to purify this revenue from that by zakat. So to purify, I didn't precise, it's true, but you purify this impure revenue by giving them to charity.
Okay.
And actually, this is the Sharia board which is in charge of controlling this process.
Okay.
The process of and this is actually precise into the IMF note. In the IMF note of 2007, you have some provision of the purification of the income, and you have and they have precise that the purification of the impure revenue should be given to charity, and the charity agreed by the French government.
Okay.
I mean, they are paying attention or which kind of charity. Yeah. Yeah, you can't give to someone, to everybody. You have to give the revenue to listed charities by the government.
Maybe a question. So about the comparison between the compensation to general partners,
Yeah.
we said that fixed compensation could be applied somehow or is authorized for Islamic venture capital. So I wonder how this could be allowed, and if is it compliant with the principle of risk and profit sharing.
Prefixed income?
I mean, so in the comparison table you made kindly.
This one?
So, yeah. So the compensation to general and limited partners, we said that fixed compensation is allowed.
If you are in
Islamic.
Mudaraba, right? His question, I think, it's more like in Mudaraba. How can you fixed remuneration would be allowed? More or less this.
Yeah, so fixed remuneration is somehow questionable in Islamic finance because of the principle of risk and profit sharing. So how it could be allowed now in for Islamic venture capital?
Actually, this table is coming from a study of Durrami and Bokuk, who that made it on the Islamic venture capital, and I took it from them. And according to their study, this kind of compensation are accepted, but they are not. You know, in Islamic finance, you have many different point of view, and you have to do something that you are allowed it, but for different people, different Sharia board, it's not allowed it. So it's still questionable. I got your point, and it's still questionable for this point.
It's allowed based on wakala, and it's mentioned in the IOF standards.
Yeah. The question, if it is a mudaraba,
No,
it is very difficult to admit it. Now, if it is wakala, then
So you have still discussion,
so
and
it depends on
it
the
depends.
contract.
It depends on
It is
the
management
contract.
company.
Yeah.
What type? But the management company cannot have both. Cannot have all the benefits of the mudaraba contract and at the same time all the benefit of the wakala contract. I think so, because it's going to be like
Yeah, it's not profit share and not sharing.
Okay, so thank you for this clarification. I have one other question, mainly related to the environment in France. So
Yeah.
we have noted that there is an effort from French government, from French asset managers,
Previously.
yeah, for Islamic finance and also for what we call social responsible investment funds.
Yeah, exactly.
So they are quite doing the same thing. So they are screening the equities.
Green finance.
Yeah, and we see that there's an enhancement of these markets in last years. So how venture capital investment fund, Islamic funds could compete with such a kind of investment, which is still running today, and there are some other efforts.
How they could compete? Actually, they are in the same line. This is ethical finance. Mm-hmm. Both are doing ethical finance, and of course they could compete because you have a demand in France, but people, they are not communicated. I'm pretty sure that when I've been to Harvard and I have presented this study, and the people, they were very surprised that you can do Islamic venture capital in the French legal framework. They thought that people were thinking that France is against Islamic finance. You have nothing for structuring this kind of operation, and this is the total contrary. I think that there is a lack of communication. People are not aware that the French legal framework is already suitable to Islamic finance. And I'm pretty sure that as soon as they're going to realize that you can structuring Islamic funds, you can do Islamic venture capital in the country, of course they're going to compete the green fund, the social responsible fund, and actually, as I said, they could attract this kind of structure could attract investor from abroad, Islamic investor, foreign investor from the Middle East, and we know that these people, they have liquidity, they want to invest in Europe, and especially in France. And in France, on the other side, you have French entrepreneurs who wants to set up a company in compliance with their faith, with their religious faith. So you have the offer, you have the demand, you have everything. So I'm maybe a little bit too more optimistic, but of course they could compete, and they even could go do better than the green funds. Look at the market in abroad. You have heard that recently that Malaysia is going to set up the first Islamic venture capital fund, one of the biggest Islamic venture capital funds. So the market is very dynamic. So why could not be the same? And because this is ethical finance, and ethical finance is very dynamic in those days. So this is just another part of ethical finance.
Okay.
Many thanks. Maybe you can listen to Gonzalo's question before we move to Jeddah.
Yes, I would like to ask how many startups has been financed through this structure? Do you know that? And also, other question about the Sharia board. Where are they? They are normally in France, or there are some people very, very good known in the market? So these two questions. You understand?
Première question, c'est combien de sociétés ont été financées par le private equity en France?
Par le private equity? So you mean venture capital generally, not Islamic venture capital?
First question.
Islamic venture capital. How many startups has been financed?
Actually, I don't have the figure because I didn't do the study from a financial point of view. This is a legal study that just focused on the legal framework. So I don't have I can't, give you for now the updated figures for the market, and if there's... Oui.
C'est 10 milliards.
10 milliards pour le
En venture capital.
Oui, mais non, lui, il demande islamique. I mean, you're asking for Islamic venture capital, not venture capital. Islamic venture capital, I think that the market is very small, very, very small, minor. But at this point, I can't give you figures of how maybe you can look at the fund Karama-Etik as explained, and to see how the performance of this fund, because it's a fund dedicated to, I think, venture capital. Karama-Etik, they're doing venture capital.
Well, I think that it's basically listed companies.
Listed companies, so yeah.
It's more UCITS fund than.
Yeah. It's a UCIT fund.
Yeah, more than an AAFM.
But the fact that, as I explained, that we are people that are not communicated on this framework, and they are not aware that there is Islamic fund in France. We could set up Islamic fund in France. So entrepreneurs that don't realize this, so the market is very, very small compared to Malaysia or to other countries like this.
Deuxième question, on a raté.
You have another question? Sorry. Il avait une deuxième question, non?
Ouais, second question.
About the Sharia board, if you have more information about the Sharia boards in France.
Yeah, of course. So in France, actually, it's the Sharia board are better than the Islamic venture capital market. So you have few Sharia boards, and some of them are well known. One of them is called la Serfi, which is one of the most famous Sharia board in the country. They have been involved in many operations and the IOF translation standards into the French legal framework. You have also, the CIFI, thank you. You have also the CIFI, C-I-F-I. C-I-F-E-I. So you have ASERFI, CIFI. Groupe 570, il travaille avec la Serfi. So you have these two main French Sharia board.
Oui, mais il existe juridiquement, mais ils sont actifs.
In fact, there is a written study of the French Sharia boards made by Abdelrazak Belabès, who might be with us today, but unfortunately it's written in French. Unless, Abdelrazak, did you translate your study of the French Sharia board in English?
No.
No, unfortunately. Now, dear friends in Jeddah, maybe you have questions and also answers to our questions, because you might be much more precise about doctrinal points.
Okay, Pierre. Well, maybe good morning or good afternoon everywhere, Madrid, Paris, and Jeddah. Thank you, Dorsaf MATRI, for your presentation. Very interesting to listen to it. I think your conclusion is that the French law is accommodating Islamic venture capital very easily. Well, I will leave now the floor for our researchers here in Jeddah for comments and questions.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think that you need to make a clarification of your epistemological posture, because we have, if you have this article of Afaki in this book, in this paper, it's a very interesting paper. He showed that in France there is two schools. The first school, which I think it's your school, is to consider Islamic finance project as if it were interest, and the second school it consider them as if it were. I think that this is problem because when you spoke about about Karama Ethics, Ethics Fund. If in this contract we find that it accepts it accepts the product that they are charged with interest if the proportion of interest did not exceed 20% or 30%, and I think that well, this is a problem. It's juristic يعني avis of القرضاوي. We respect القرض, but I think that this is not true. That it's possible to accept the project that are charged with our interest, and this is not I think possible. So I have a question. Why in France we there is a limitation to introduce يعني for Islamic finance they think that Islamic finance did not need a specific law, but if we have the case of crowdfunding, there is a specific law. I think that there is a problem. If we are in face of Anglo-Saxon alternative products, there is possible to issue a new law, but if the case of Islam, it's not possible. I think that this is a civilizational problem, because have you? I need just a response for this. For this question.
Okay, thank you for your comments, which are very relevant. So for the first one, and regarding the Karama Ethics Funds, so the purpose of my study is not to say that the Karama Ethics Fund or all the Islamic fund structuring in France are Sharia compliant. It's just to show that the legal framework French legal framework is flexible, and that you can use the French structure to structuring Islamic funds. After, it depends of the management company and the Sharia board of the funds, if they are not doing, they're not really proceeding to a Sharia screening in the Sharia, and they are not paying attention to all the requirements. This is their problem. And the fact that if for you the fund is not Sharia compliant, which I can easily understand, maybe there is a problem with the Sharia board of the Karama Ethics funds. But the thing is that we can structuring the Islamic fund in France. This is a fact. And this is a very good point. So regarding your other question, I agree with you. And it's true that there is not a willingness from the French government to push up Islamic finance. And they don't want to, if there is a problem on the obstacle for structuring an operation, this is true that they don't want to implement a reform. There is not a really willingness to push up this market and to provide a receptive legal framework for this market. If you make the comparison with England, the English people, they are more they are better. They want to do the reform in order to implement the Islamic finance structure. For instance, I'm working with the World Bank, and we're advising some government on Islamic finance, and like Turkey or Morocco. And for instance, in Morocco, they are going to change all the framework to implement to issue a sovereign sukuk, which is something impossible in France. The government would never do this. And this is not a civilizational problem, sorry. For me, it's a political problem. This is only this. But I agree with you.
Yeah. But at the time of Christine Lagarde, there was some willingness.
Yeah, and it's true that at the time when Christine Lagarde, which is right now the head of the IMF, there was a real willingness to welcome Islamic finance. And now at this point, at her position of the CEO of the IMF, she is still pushing up for Islamic finance around the world, and especially in Europe. But the government which is now in place is not pushing up for Islamic finance. And I agree with you on this point.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I had a question, but I think Pierre has answered it, if I understand correctly. I just want a confirmation from Pierre or yourself. It is very interesting and important study in the sense that the existing legal framework in France permits or accommodates Islamic venture capital structures. And my question was that if it is permissible under the French legal framework, then it should be permissible in the all European countries. And if I understood correctly, Pierre answered that yes, the European law will permit, even if the regulator may be located in France, but it can be marketed anywhere in the European market. Is that correct? I need a confirmation on that, and then I have a couple of other comments.
Okay, thank you for your question and your comments. Actually, this is correct. You can structure, if you're structuring, for instance, an Islamic fund in France, and you got the approval for the IMF, and you can use the passport in or the passport out, you can market this Islamic fund in Europe. But the thing is that you have to focus in every European country if the Sharia screening is permitted. I mean, in France, the Financial Market Authority has authorized the process of the Sharia screening, but I don't know if in Germany it's authorized by the German Financial Market Authority. It's probably authorized, but I don't know. You have to look at every country if their regulation of mutual funds is permitted Sharia screening. But I'm pretty sure that this is the case, but we have to check it. But I mean, if you're structuring a French Islamic fund, which has been agreed that the IMF, yes, you can market this product in Europe.
So thank you very much for this clarification. That means that the French accommodation of the Islamic venture capital is actually European accommodations for the Islamic financial. And this is very, very interesting study from that perspective. Now I have two other comments. With respect to the Sharia screening, you use the term that the things which are not permitted are entertainment activities. One of them you mentioned, entertainment activities.
Yeah.
I wish you use another word for that. That gives an impression as if Islam is a very dull religion. It does not allow any entertainment. What it prohibits is dirty activities or unethical activities like pornography, etc.
Yeah.
But if you have a soccer match or a swimming competition as entertainment activity or a Quran recitation competition.
Swimming for men, not women.
Well, women is also permitted for women and men for men at this aggregation. But what I mean to say is that I wish that you use another term rather than that Islam, Sharia screening has to disallow entertainment activities. Dirty or unethical activities perhaps may be a better term to use. This is one thing, only maybe terminology which I think sends a wrong signal with respect to the Islamic ethics. We do have entertainment activities and we enjoy soccer match as much as the French people do. But we do not have many people killed in stampeding in the soccer matches. That may be the difference. The second question or comment is that in the screening also you mentioned that the non-Sharia compliant income should be less than 5%. Of course, these are not passed by any fake academy, all these 33 and 50 and 5%, but they are in general accepted by some Sharia scholars and they have taken root in the market. But a related condition for this 5% is that Islam does not permit even 0.1% interest. Not to talk about 5%, not even 0.1%. So this 5% has to be separable. It is permissible in this sense. So if it is, the second condition is also imposed that this 5% is separable and this is not used for distribution among the shareholders. It is given to charities. So this is important to mention that this 5% should be separable and not to be distributed among the shareholders. Islam does not permit any riba whatsoever.
Thank you very much for your comments, which are very relevant. I totally agree with you. Entertainment is permitted by Islam and by Islamic finance. I didn't use the right term. And of course, we have to precise that there is some kind of entertainment which are forbidden by Islamic finance. And the other hand, I'm also totally agree with you that this 5% have to be given to charity. They are not dedicated for investors. And actually, the IMF has precised this into the note of 2007. So thank you very much for your comment.
And that's another thing. You keep on saying IMF. We in Muslim countries, we do not like IMF because they have messed up many economies. Perhaps in Arabic you say AMF. I have
AMF. Sorry. I'm using the French pronunciation.
So that's only yes, AMF. I read it. It's the French regulatory authority.
AMF. Sorry.
But we don't like IMF.
Okay, d'accord. And what about the World Bank? Are you okay with the World Bank?
Well, it depends. Sorry. Depends. When I say we don't like IMF, we do not like some of the conditions that they impose on Muslim countries to give financing. Like many times they say that you have to withdraw subsidies on essentials. There were big riots in Jordan because of that conditionality. That's what. And if the conditionality is there, World Bank funding, we don't like that kind of conditionality, which will affect our social culture.
Okay. Yeah, I got your point. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I have nearly 4 questions, very short. First is, in the FIA, Alternative Investment Funding, what are the other alternatives the French government is providing besides crowdfunding? And second question is, why do you think private equity investor company is not suitable for Islamic investment? And Third question, which I just want to understand or know, is fund of the funds. What's the size of this fund and what's the purposes where it is allowed to be invested? And to understand furthermore, I could not understand this passporting in and passporting out. If you can explain further. The last one is the Sharia screening. I personally don't see Sharia screening to be a problem anywhere. It is your choice how you are screening the company or the institution where you want to invest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Actually, the crowdfunding is not part of the alternative and investment funds. It's another regulation in the French legal framework that they have. The crowdfunding is regulated by another provision by the French legal framework, but not related to FIA. And not related to the fund. So you can do crowdfunding, but another way. You don't have to use a fund to structure this kind of operation. So why I didn't talk about the private company for venture capital? Because the private equity investment company, because after my analysis, I just realized that this structure is not adapted to structuring in Islamic venture capital operation, and especially is not adapted for investors from abroad, foreign investors and qualified investors. You have constrained in terms of investment, and the structure is very complicated to set up. So, and it's not really suitable for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation, which means that you have to working with investors from abroad to use the Sharia screening. So that's why I didn't use it. And I don't think that this structure could be suitable for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation. Funds of fund, of course. Actually, the market of funds of fund in France is pretty dynamic, and if you could structure an Islamic fund, you of course could structure an Islamic fund of fund, or you can proceed to this. But I don't have the figure in my mind right now. But the market is pretty dynamic. And I think that it could be set up into the French legal framework for no problems. Islamic? Oui. Actually, I've heard that there is already there is already Islamic fund of fund in France, so yeah, it's already set up, so it's possible. And for the last one, the Sharia screening, il avait dit quoi?
Passport in, passport out.
Ah yes. Actually, I'm just going to re-explain what is the passport in, what is the passport out. In the European legislation, you can the Alternative Investment Fund Manager Directive has been set up in order to harmonize the legislation, the regulation for mutual funds in Europe. And according to this directive, when you're creating a fund into a European country, this fund could ask for a passport in. So, could ask for passport out, which means that this fund could ask to be marketed in another European country, that its own country, or this fund could ask for a passport in. So, which means that passport in, c'est the foreign fund could ask to invest into national, into, for instance, France. So this regulation is applicable to all the European countries. So all the funds, European funds, agreed and under the scope of the IFM directive, could ask for a passport in or passport out, which means that they could ask to be marketed across European countries.
Another point related to this is that it's passport in and passport out. I hope that passport holder in and passport holder out is also possible. The Europeans are not following Trump to ban travel from certain countries.
Yeah, I hope so.
You did not answer the first question, which was, I mean, you explained the crowdfunding, but what are the other alternative investment funds are permitted there?
The other possibility of AFI.
Actually the AFI, that you have a lot of possibilities. You are just focused on the private equity investment fund, but under the scope of the AFI, you have all the investment fund dedicated to specific activities. So you have private equity investment fund, proximity investment fund, which means that you can invest into the region. You have fund dedicated to innovation. So you have several type of funds. So and all of them are dedicated to specific activity. I just focused on the private equity investment fund because they are useful for structuring an Islamic venture capital operation. But of course, you have around 4 or 6 different forms of funds under the scope of the FEA.
I think you said private equity investment funds?
Yeah. So this is the structure I used for my...
That is not acceptable. That's what I understood. You focused on the venture capital.
No, the private equity investment fund, I agreed, of course. That's why I used then the...
Parce que les private equity investment companies...
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that there is a misunderstood because with the terms, the FEA actually, it is a... il voit l'écran en fait quand je montre. In this diagram, look at this diagram. I'm explaining that the FEA, you have in the FEA, you have a fund dedicated to private equity, and this fund dedicated to private equity is entitled FCPR, which is the translation in English is Private Equity Investment Fund, which is something different from the private equity investment company. This is a fund dedicated to private equity, and it's called FCPR, and this kind of fund are under the scope of the FEA. Non, mais je vais expliquer. Private equity investment company is something different. This is a company which has been set up to doing private equity, but it is not a fund. And regarding or analyze, this structure is not suitable for Islamic venture capital operation. But FCPR, private equity investment funds under the scope of the FEA are suitable for Islamic venture capital.
Yeah. May I add something?
Oui, bien sûr.
Private equity investment companies, they are not suitable because we are asking the public to invest in the fund.
Yeah, and then they are not open to foreign investors too.
But if they are closed, like a common company, like an SAS and something like that, then it is a different question.
Yeah, it's a different question, but it's a complicated structure to set up.
If it is a French
and you have a lot
company,
of tax constraints.
So if it is the French Islamic investor company, then that's fine, right?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I didn't choose this structure because in terms of tax relief and you have a lot of complication, a lot of things to set up, and this is not the easily way to structure an Islamic venture capital operation. That's why I didn't focus on private equity companies, investment companies, because the structure is not flexible. This is a whole structure in the legal French legal framework. Is not adapted to foreign investors. Funds, private equity investment funds are more adapted, more flexible.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you did a very good job, Dorsaf, that you showed there is a room for Islamic venture capital within the current legal system in France. But of course, to go to the real market, I think you need a lot of marketing and efforts, including political will, to attract enough funds from around the world, especially the Middle East and GCC countries. You know, Luxembourg is leading in Europe in this regard. We had a meeting in Madrid maybe 2 or 3 months ago with one of the experts there, and he shows us the great effort that they did in order to attract the funds from around the world for Islamic countries to be also a leader. So it is very important to do marketing, which includes political marketing also, in order to attract funds. But I think you did a very good job that there is a room within the system without needing to make huge changes within the legal system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, so by this we say thank you, Pierre, thank you everybody in Madrid, and it's a very interesting lecture. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.